Hello friends, today we will be discussing about wetland, estuarine and mangrove ecosystems. So we will be discussing about these major forms of aquatic ecosystem. So these are all examples of aquatic ecosystem. So within that we will be discussing about wetlands, estuarines and mangrove ecosystems. Now first let us come to what is meant by a wetland ecosystem. So basically a wetland is considered as a transition zone. So what is meant by a transition zone? Transition means changing. So transition, definitely the literal meaning is change, and therefore transition zone means that a zone where one form of land or one form of an ecosystem is giving way to another form, that is from land to water or vice versa. So basically this transition zones, they are called ecotone. So what is meant by an ecotone? An ecotone means that those transitional areas from where one type of ecosystem gives way to another type of ecosystem. So wetlands are basically ecotones, or they are transition zones where there is a change between or a transition between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. So we cannot entirely say that wetland ecosystem is terrestrial, or neither we can say that it is aquatic. So it's a transition, or it is actually a transition zone or an ecotone between the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystem. And those wetlands, they are the areas of marsh or peatland with water that is static or flowing. So this means that in wetland, the water can be either static, which means that without flow, so without any flow of water, or it can be flowing. So either it can be static or it can be flowing. Now fresh, brackish or saline, including areas of marine water, the depth of which at the low tide does not exceed 6 meters. So this is one kind of definition that we can give for wetland ecosystem. So it can be fresh water or brackish or saline water, and it also includes those areas of marine water up to the depth of 6 meters. Now examples of wetlands are lake littorals, floodplains, marshy or swampy areas. So these are all examples of wetland ecosystem. Now the wetland ecosystem, let's come to the features of wetland ecosystem. They have hydric soils. Hydric soil means there is an absence of oxygen, or not enough oxygen is available. So the type of soil in the wetland ecosystem is hydric soil, and also hydrophyte plants. So hydrophyte plants and hydric soils are a characteristic feature of the wetland ecosystem. India has over 27,000 wetlands. So India has more than 27,000 wetlands, and it comprises of 18.4% of country's area. So about 18.4% of India's total area, it is comprised of wetlands, and within that 23,000 inland wetlands and 4,000 coastal wetland. So this clearly means that the inland wetlands, the area of inland wetlands is more than that of coastal wetlands. In the UPSC preliminary examination, you can expect such type of questions, comparative questions. So here understand that the area covered under inland wetlands are higher than that of coastal wetlands. Now let's come to what are inland type of wetlands and coastal wetlands. Now inland type includes high altitude wetlands in the Himalayas, floodplains of major river systems, saline and temporary wetlands of the arid and semi-arid. Arid and semi-arid means desert like ecosystem. So these are all examples of inland type of ecosystem. Wetland ecosystem. Next we have the coastal wetlands. So coastal wetlands, it includes lagoons, backwaters, estuaries, mangroves, swamps and coral reefs. So these are the examples of coastal wetlands. Now remember, inland wetlands are more in area as compared to coastal wetlands. This is a very important point in the preliminary examination, or otherwise UPSC can ask you such type of statements or such type of questions. Now let's see what is the difference between a lake and a wetland. This is because most of the candidates gets confused between these two things. What is the difference between wetlands and lakes? So we cannot give a clear-cut definition or distinction or difference. There is no clear difference between lakes and wetlands. Lakes are less important compared to wetland. Why are lakes less important? This is because of the biodiversity. Because of the aspect of biodiversity, which means that the wetlands have more biodiversity as compared to the lakes. So lakes are less important in terms of biodiversity as compared to the wetlands. Wetlands are shallow water bodies, whereas lakes can be deep or shallow. So wetlands are necessarily shallow, but lakes, it can be shallow, it can also be deep. So this is another distinction. So wetlands are necessarily shallow. Wetlands have less than 3 meter depth, but lakes have minimum depth of 3 meter. So this is another point of distinction. Anyway, we cannot clearly distinguish between or distinct between a lake and a wetland. Now, wetlands are very rich in nutrients. Why? Because they are ecotone. So, as they are ecotone, they are very rich in nutrients, and there is abundant growth of aquatic macrophytes, and lakes have no or very little aquatic vegetation. So, basically the wetlands, they are biologically very diverse. That means the biodiversity is very high. The reason being that they are rich in nutrients. So they are very rich in nutrients, and because of that there is a abundant growth of aquatic macrophytes, and the lakes, they have no or very little aquatic vegetation. So this is another distinction, that the aquatic vegetation in the wetlands is very high as compared to the lakes. Majorly detritus food chain are found in wetlands, and grazing type is found in lakes. Now, what is meant by detritus? It means dead and decayed organisms. So, majorly we can see detritus food chain in wetlands. That means the food chain which begins with dead and decayed organisms. So it begins with the consumption of dead and decayed organisms, whereas grazing type of food chain is found in lakes. Now what is meant by grazing type? Which means that the food chain starts with grass. Okay. Now coming to the productivity. The productivity is very low in lakes, whereas the productivity is very high in wetlands. The reason being that there is sufficient availability of nutrients in the wetlands. Now, no waste treatment in lakes, but in wetlands there is natural provision for treatment of waste. Why? Can you guess? Can you make some guess why the wetlands have some natural provision of waste treatment? The reason is that we have seen that in case of wetlands, the food chain is majorly detritus. It starts with dead and decayed organisms. So food chain in the wetlands start with the consumption of dead and decayed organisms, and for that matter this helps in management of waste, but such a provision is not available in case of lakes. Now let's come to the importance of wetlands. Why are wetlands important both in terms of biodiversity and in ecological terms? First reason, it's a habitat to aquatic flora and fauna, native and migratory species. So it's definitely a habitat for flora and fauna because the biodiversity in the wetlands are very high. So when the biodiversity is high, it means that there is a large population of different species. So definitely the flora and fauna is very high, and apart from that, it is not just native species that are found in the wetlands, but wetlands are most importantly also a habitat for migratory birds, migratory species. And it also provides sustainable tourism. It provides various ecosystem services. Now, regarding waste treatment or waste management, as we said, wetlands have a important feature of natural waste treatment. They carry out water purification, filtration of sediments and nutrients, that is nutrient cycling, and they also play a very important role in flood mitigation. Also, they buffer the shorelines against erosion and pollutants. So, these are all some of the important provisions of the wetlands. Now, let's understand what are the various threats faced by the wetlands. So, what are the challenges or any threats regarding the laws of wetlands? First one is habitat destruction and deforestation has created ecological imbalance. Now, habitat destruction majorly means that the habitat of various species, it's lost. So, habitat of various species has lost, and also deforestation, cutting down of forest. So, deforestation and habitat destruction has created an ecological imbalance, and conversion of wetlands for agriculture. So, wetlands are converted into land for cultivation or agriculture. So, that is another threat that is faced. As we have seen what are the importance or significance of wetlands, we understand that they help a lot in maintaining the biological or ecological balance. So, when the wetlands are converted into agricultural land, the area under wetlands will come down. Therefore, the ecological balance will also be under threat. Another threat is overfishing and aquaculture. So, overfishing and aquaculture, again, these are all commercial purposes. When the wetlands are used for commercial purposes, or we can say over exploitation of the resources of the wetlands, is another cause of threat. Excessive pollutants, overgrazing in marshy areas, and sand mining. So, all these are anthropogenic or man-made causes. Man-made causes or anthropogenic causes. Okay. So, anthropogenic or man-made causes, and we can say that all these are due to over-exploitation of resources. Over exploitation of resources in the wetlands. So, due to this, the wetlands are facing a huge challenge or threat of destruction. Now, let's see what are the mitigation strategies. So, these are the important mitigation strategies. Proper enforcement of laws and stringent punishments. Now, the problem is that we have a lot number of policies, we have a lot number of laws for the protection, but the ground level implementation or practical implementation of these laws or the policies is a big challenge. Now, if proper enforcement of laws are there, then we will be able to help out the wetlands from being destructed. Then, sustainable usage. Now, what is meant by this term sustainability? Sustainability means care for the future generation, or we can rather say that preservation of the resources for the future generation. So, sustainability or sustainable usage means that we are protecting the resources or preserving the resources for a future use or for the future generation. So, this is called sustainable use, considering the needs of the future generation as well. So, if we put sustainability into a proper definition, it will be that the use of resources taking care of the needs for the future, or the use of resources in a way that the needs of the future generation is not compromised. So, I will just write down the use of resources without compromising the needs of the future generation. Okay, so this is called sustainability. Next is preventing unsustainable aquaculture. As we said, overfishing and aquaculture is another thing. So, aquaculture and fishing should be done in a sustainable manner. Then next is the treatment of industrial effluents and water from the farmlands, which will add pollutions. So, the effluents means the pollutants and waste from the farmlands and industries should be treated properly before they are dropped into or before they are discharged into this wetlands. Next one is afforestation and weed control. Afforestation means planting of trees. So planting of trees and weed control. Next is soil conservation measures. Why? Because if the soil is not conserved, then this can lead to soil erosion. So soil erosion can be again a very important threat to the conservation of wetlands. So this is all about wetland ecosystem. Next we will come to estuaries. Okay, so this is all about the wetland ecosystem.